CFL Red-Zone Rule is real cool. The coolest that rolls, and a real tool that rolls. High-powered offensive tool that rolls. There's a super-exciting new CFL rule that rolls. Spider, spider, here comes Spider, CFL's Red Zone Rule. Spider, spider, here comes Spider, CFL's Red Zone Rule. Hey, Spider's back! Did I scare you? Drumming on the, I got a new CFL Wilson, right? Like the movie. Ball there. When it's moving, you can't, it's very hard to drum on. I don't know how I even did that, attempted that. It's not like a stationary drum. That was really difficult. Anyway, so it was off. You know, don't be too hard on me now. Anyway, I got a different little set here because I want to just come back and basically talk about what's going on with the CBA that was ratified by the players and now the owners. And we had a couple exhibition games. So actually, I think 3, I believe. All right, don't quote me on that. But anyway, so like, and I'm wearing my son's shirt. Look at this, you know, Spider CFL Red-Zone Rule. There you go. So if you want no more distasteful, non-eventful, easy chip shot fills and field goals in the red zone, and by the way, you know what happens before that? More boring, unappealing, like two down football stops in the red zone, resulting in more non-eventful, easy chip shot field goals. So this is the message on the T-shirt my son made up. He made up 3 of them actually, and cups. Right? Spider CFL Red-Zone Rule cups, okay? And you see my hats. Okay, you see my Spider CFL Red-Zone Rule hats. I took the proposed off because Steve Armitage told me to do that. But anyway, I'm back and I can't read upside down, so I know what's on there, but you guys know what's on there. And it's accurate. I mean, my CFL Red-Zone Rule will eliminate the 2 biggest killers and turnoffs in the red zone. That's what this T-shirt's all about, okay? And that being, you know, like the T-shirt says, you know, way too many boring 2-down football stops in the red zone. I mean, they are, listen, they're magnified in the red zone, and it results in more boring, predictable, non-eventful, distasteful, easy chip shot field goals, which my CFL Red Zone Rule will remarkably, completely eliminate. Imagine that in the red zone. And all at the same time, remarkably still preserve our 3-down game of football. Now that's a rule. Now compare with the hashmark rule, which is so gimmicky. Come on, I watched the exhibition game, and it's apparently the real math on that, because I said 7, but it's apparently it's 4 yards in each side, so that's a total of 8. It's narrowed, okay, so 4 yards in each side. And you've noticed something in Saskatchewan. I didn't watch much of Winnipeg. There's people watching the hockey game, but you saw nobody in the stands. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about the Calgary Stampeders exhibition game, what my son said, okay? Okay, by text to me. But they were passing more, and they're going to too, little short passes sideways because of the hash marks now, because they can get it over there quicker and they don't have to throw the ball as far. So you're going to see all these twisted sideways passes because of the hash marks being narrow, and it's going to ruin our game, make it even worse. It was bad before. They were doing like the first and second down little passing plays over to the sideline, you know, under 10 yards, and little 5 yard passes or whatever, and coming up short because of it, and doing it repetitively, and more and more 2-and-outs. So, and Brogy says the hashmark rule is going to basically eliminate 2-and-outs. You know, you see hardly any 2-and-outs, and he said it will be the biggest rule ever adopted by the CFL, and the most entertaining, most exciting rule. And he actually said it will be not only CFL football, would be the best ever to watch, 3-down football. But he said it will be the biggest rule and make CFL football the best brand of professional football in the world to watch, and that's over the NFL. Well, the hashmark rule is not going to do it, but my CFL Red-Zone Rule could do that and give them a run for their money because of what it can do. Go on my Facebook page and see the 10 super features and benefits that that's only one of a powerful 10 super features and benefits, and they're key and they're compelling, and they're stunning and they're powerful features. And what is a hash mark? Where's the features? Where is it at? It's gonna be worse. It's gonna make I see it even down. I notice outside the red zone, they were going for it and 3rd down because, oh, by the way, during the exhibitions, there's no ridiculous Canadian ratio, so they're playing everybody, which they should be able to do now if they want to be a real player in the CFL. But we'll get into that soon. But I noticed down, and there was all kinds of. They went on the 3rd down, and they were 3 and outs. There would have been 2 and outs and easy chip shot field goals. Monotonous easy chip shot field goals that nobody wants to see, especially in a 3-down game of football. That's, like I said, a huge turn-off, huge killer of a CFL 3-down game that my CFL Red-Zone Rule will eliminate completely. And, it was like they were using my CFL Red-Zone Rule, but then, if they would have, which they did in most cases, maintains possession of the ball, where my CFL Red Zone Rule, enforcement rule comes in, where they have to go for 3rd down, like they were doing in the Saskatchewan Winnipeg Blue Bomber exhibition game in Saskatchewan. Then if they maintain possession of the ball and stay inside the red zone and aren't forced outside the red zone, which would be a huge defensive play. And what an invigorating plot. And the drama that would set my Spider CFL Red Zone Rule in the red zone would be phenomenal. But if they maintain possession of the ball and not push outside, the red zone and 3rd down, they would get my CFL Red Zone Rule kick from the 35 at the 7 for the 42. That's a real challenging kick too. But the betting the betting would be lucrative. It'd be the most popular bet, and the anticipation of CFL, team on offense getting in the red zone to play my CFL Red Zone Rule to score a touchdown, and it's not only going to be super exciting and super entertaining, like from the offensive, standpoint, offensively, but defensively as well, it's going to be just as exciting, because defensively they could come up with a huge, if the 3rd downs need it, with my CFL Red Zone Rule in the red zone, defensively they come up with a huge stop and prevent a touchdown being scored on 3rd down if needed with my CFL Red Zone Rule. And then if they force them outside on 3rd down, outside the red zone, then they get my Spider CFL Red Zone Rule kick. So it's just, and the unpredictability element that's to my CFL Red Zone Rule in the red zone is phenomenal. And imagine the diagram. I don't only have one monitor, but my CFL Red Zone Rule diagram. You go on my CFL Red Zone Rule Facebook page, you'll see it. It's right on the top. Imagine the 20 airlines outlined in red and the number 20 in the red zone, and then my CFL Red Zone Rule logo on top of it, and the graphics they could do with sponsorship tags. And with betting, they could rake in the money on this, and also they could put a CFL Red Zone Rule kick graphic too, especially if it's being kicked from the 42 for 3 points. See, that's why it's such a really compatible and a good add-on, a good attachment to my CFL Red Zone Rule, because it really puts it to bed and it makes it 100% foolproof, right? Really, because you can't have a CFL team march down a 110-yard field playing basically 2-down football and get in the red zone using my CFL Red Zone Rule, and they're stopped. If they're forced outside, they're going to lose my CFL Red Zone kick. But if they maintain possession of the ball, and if it's 3rd downs needed in the red zone, playing my CFL Red Zone Rule, and aren't pushed outside the red zone on 3rd down, they get my Spider CFL Red Zone Rule kick, which is a bonus for them, because they're playing with my CFL Red Zone Rule enforcement rule. It's an enforcement rule. So if they stay inside the red zone, if they stop on 3rd down, they still get my Spider CFL Red Zone Rule kick. Okay, which is a lot more challenging kick from the 35, add the 7 from the 42, which will add more drama and excitement to my CFL Red Zone Rule. But comparably, it's like my son's, it's not even debatable here. The hashmark rule versus my CFL Red Zone Rule, which is so far superior. It's almost laughable, really. Seriously. And there's so much more that it can do. The 18% guarantee, the 54-point average percentage, that was at 2018 I believe 2007 was 54.8, 50.7. But at that average percentage, okay, if they're in the CFL, if they're in the red zone, my CFL red zone rule, with that average percentage of 54.8, okay, and third down's needed and they go for a touchdown, and if they have that average, if they average that 54.8%, they'll be guaranteed 18% more, 18% guaranteed more touchdowns scored in the red zone amongst 9 CFL teams for a regular CFL season. And you know what that results? That equals to 50 more touchdowns for a total of 200 more points. That's if all single converts are good, because of the spread between an easy chip shot field goal and a touchdown is 4 points. So, okay, you take 50 multiplied by 4, you get 200 points. Okay, but even at the 51%, which was 2021, that's why Rob Vanstone from the Leader Post, Jimmy John Leader Post, pretty prominent. You know, he's basically an icon sports writer. He's been writing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders for decades, and he wrote that, you know, basically famous 1989 book, Grey Cup book, you know, on the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the Sky Dome against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. We went down to the last field goal. I think it was either 41-44 or 40-43, I forget, but it was one of the best Grey Cup games ever watched. Okay, in the history of the CFL, and it's Mr. Vanstone. I mean, he after the 2021 season says, Spider sent me an email and said, you know, your CFL Red-Zone Rule has proven itself with lots of ammo to prove why it should be made part of a CFL 3-down game. And Steve Armitage, you know, sports legend, icon, he endorsed my CFL Red-Zone Rule stamp approval. He's fascinated. Now Farhan Laji, okay, from TSN, who he does CFL, broadcasts CFL games now in TSN. He said he endorsed my rule, which Mr. Vanstone said was a huge endorsement, and Mr. Vanstone's endorsement is huge too, and Steve Armitage's is huge. There's three prominent sports figures, okay, but you know, Mr. Farhan Laji said that he would, if it came to a vote for my CFL Red Zone Rule to be adopted by the CFL, he would vote for it to have it made part of a CFL 3-down game. That's pretty powerful stuff. So that's, by the way, you got to get my CFL Red Zone Rule out there. You have to get it out there. You got to get it out there. Help me get it out there. I'm gonna be doing what I said I'm gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna find out how to do a podcast. It takes time to set up for a podcast. Okay, or like it's sort of like a radio. It's not. You can do them video, but I'd probably do the traditional like podcast radio type format. I got to work on that. I'm dealing with issues with my health right now and other issues. So I just got back home, you know, a few weeks ago, as you know. So I got some health issues I have to deal with. I'm in my shorts though today. It's so hot here in the theater room here. You know, in my bare feet, I feel good, and I'm having an attitude that I know I'm really sore in my rib cage, my chest wall, and back, my ribs in the back and down my side, because you know they're not healed yet, and I broke 12 ribs. By the way, half my rib cage when I had that fall in front of my garage on ice, trying to help my aunt with picking up a prescription. I had a window, and I went down, and I paid dearly. So it's been 16 weeks, and I'm still in a lot of pain, and I can't get in for like a major test to see what's really going on there now after 16 weeks with digital images, right? This to the 17th of June. So right now, this is just a temporary set. This is not my main setting that I set up, and because I'm not doing a series of videos. So I just want to talk about. So hopefully I can recover from this, but it's going to be a long. It's going to be 3 or 4 months or more. I mean, it's what happened to me was very scary, and I'm lucky to be alive because I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was dying right on the spot. But here I am. Spider's back. He's still alive, and my CFL Red-Zone Rule is still alive because I'll tell you why. Because it's the people like you. It's the mass market sports fans. It's the younger generation sports fans, and the NFL only fans. That's the mass market that don't watch the CFL. They're turned off. And I'll tell you something, and I'm going to send an email out to Farhan Laji to tell him what my son said. my son didn't go to the exhibition game and the Stampeder game, PC Lion game. He didn't go. He's so turned off by the CFL. He's so turned off how they, Randy Ambrose and the CFL and the members of the CFL Innovation Rules Committee and the main CFL Rules Committee, what they did to my rule, out of jealousy, out of huge ego, because they didn't come up with themselves. They want to be the big heroes with their little gimmicky little minor little tweaks, new rules, and their little gimmicky Mickey Mouse little hashmark little tweak rule that they think is going to be so fantastic. Well, I'm sorry. It's going to make our game, I think, worse. Because I noticed too, when they're outside the red zone, I meant to say, they did the same thing. They threw a little tiny pass because the hatch marks are narrow, a little tiny pass sideways rather than. I mean, this is just outside. But this is, oh no, that was in the red zone. They did it. Can you imagine? It's terrible, and the field goals are gonna be so easy because they're straight on. It is like Mark Trestman said, it's just a distraction. It's a minor alteration, and it's basically a joke. And it was never needed before with all the star quarterbacks in the CFL. They had big, huge touchdowns on both sides, going down the sideline and going down the middle of the field, throwing the ball downfield, big touchdowns, and lots of scoring, lots of touchdowns being scored. And like, this is so gimmicky, and it's an absolute disgrace. And so is the new collective bargaining agreement. And by the way, my son said that he doesn't think he's going to renew because he's really mad about what he wants the Canadian ratio going. A lot of his friends won't even go to CFL game because of the Canadian ratio. And by the way, they're all sold and fascinated on my CFL Red-Zone Rule, like Steve Armitage was, like they all were, like Steve, Farrar Lodge was, and all the 500 plus I surveyed. They're all fascinated, captivated by it. And by the way, that's exactly what would happen if the mass market sports fans knew about my CFL Red-Zone Rule. So we need to get it out there. But my son says he's not going to renew his season tickets after 15 years. He's so turned off. And by the way, I can't blame him. I can't blame him, I told him. The CBA, the collective bargaining agreements, basically what's happening here is the CFL is basically being run by the Canadian players and the Canadian ratio. And there's two ratios, Canadian ratios. There's one that is half the Canadian roster. Imagine that, 21 players. And there's the other that guarantees, and by the way, that Canadian half roster ratio is guaranteed too. And then there's the handcuffing dictating, okay, Canadian starter ratio. That in 2023, which is 7 by the way, in 2023 it's going to 8. And by the way, before this all went down, the last 2021 season, I think they even canned that to Canadian players. They were going to allow like American players to sub for Canadian players in that 7 starter ratio if they got injured for the rest of the game. Canadian players get rid of that. They control the CFL. That's not happening. I don't think it even happened that year. It was supposed to, but I think it got canned. Like the owners in the CFL and RZA, they're caving in. They're bowing to them, and they're basically running. They are running the CFL into the ground. By the way, they're running it into the ground, and what they got, the CFL owners and the CFL went in and said they didn't want the Canadian starter ratio. Period. They wanted to eliminate it, and of course that's why they didn't ratify it. And they voted it down. And there's 400 rookie American at CFL training camps weren't even allowed to vote. Canadian players rigged that too. It's unbelievable. And even the Edmund Eskimos didn't vote. So the whole thing was a setup. And then they wanted money to ratify it. Money, which they got. And they didn't want the Canadian ratio touched. Actually, they wanted to increase it, which they did to 8. And I'll get that into in 2023. I'll get into that in a minute. So it didn't decrease, it increased. Unbelievable. No wonder my son's so upset, and so am I. And I really believe, like my son said, the CFL is going down. And I'll end in this video session and explain to why. And if things were different and they've done things different, and they're to blame, by the way, for it. They're to blame. they're the ones that are allowing the Canadian players and the Canadian, their union and their Canadian ratio to run the CFL and run it in the ground because they're selfish. And by the way, they want one-year contracts just like the Americans. It's still one-year contracts. It hasn't been changed. They want them as much or more because they want to go to the NFL. There's 25 down there now, top Canadian players in the NFL down there now. Okay, and more being signed. And so the leftover picks, some of them are going down with injuries already, for season injuries already. They're gone. Listen, it's not even obtainable or realistic, the Canadian ratio, the half Canadian guaranteed roster ratio and the guaranteed handcuffing dictating Canadian starter ratio of 7 and then go to 8 on 23. And by the way, what's interesting about this, I had heard that guy, Oski Wee Wee, and he says, oh, there's other ratios like around in professional sports leagues. Well, there's home, he's talking about the Premier League. Well, he's wrong. In the Premier League, yes, they have their homegrown, but it's their best talent homegrown. I mean, not in the CFL, they're all down in the NFL. And by the way, they're not forced to start them. There's no ratio that says starting ratio. They have to start them in the Premier League. So you're wrong, Oski Wee Wee, your podcast show, whoever your name is. I'm sorry. That's ignorant of you to say that because you're totally wrong. And in MLS soccer, they have 3 Canadian roster spots that are like a ratio. I think they just call it roster spots that they give 3 on the team. But that's it. They're not forced to start them. Listen, it's the only so-called professional league, and how can it be a professional league? I want to ask the CFL, Randy Ambrosi, okay, and the CFL owners a question. How can the CFL be a professional 3-down football league if they're not even allowed to recruit and start and play the best available players for an entire game in the CFL? How can they be called a real professional football league? If you want to be a Canadian football, with all Canadian players, amateur football league, that's what you'd call it, be that. But don't pretend to be a real CFL professional football league when you're not even allowed, like all the other major sports leagues can, play the best and start and play the best players for an entire CFL game. It's unbelievable. So it's unbelievable what's happening. So no wonder my son's turned off. And you know what he said to me? I texted Dad, I'm not paying good money of my salary to go to a CFL game and watch Canadian players that aren't even good and have no business being on the field or on the roster and are starting. And I'm paying good money for $75 a ticket or whatever, or more to watch him because he's down in the 15-yard line. But he's got season tickets, but it'll be his last year. He's done. And so if you have a fan like my son who's so loyal, right, and has been so loyal, and turn off like that, no wonder there's so many empty seats. And you tell me that, Canadian players, like my son said, say, oh, if you get rid of the Canadian ratio, no one will go to the games. Well, that's the reason no one's going to the games. And all these little minor little tweak, gimmicky little rules and this hashmark little garbage little rule. Okay, there's my phone ringing. Sorry, you have to listen, and my machine may come on. But I meant to put it in the other room, but I'll talk over it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. So anyway, so I have to talk louder. This is horrible what's going on in the CFL. There'll never be a player like this as a professional football league. Okay, it's my aunt calling. Okay, anyway, so I can't shut it down. I have to talk over. But anyway, the Canadian players and the Canadian Players Association are running the CFL into the ground. They're running the CFL and running it in the ground. Myself, I'm as Canadian as it gets. And so is my son. My favorite band's the Guess Who. I have BlackBerry still. That's what I use for my monitor. The playbook still. Because they have an HDMI cord. HDMI cord. So anyway, yes, we want to watch we're proud Canadian. We don't watch the best Canadian players play, but a player like John Cornish, not that he's a Calgary Stampeder, but he wanted to play in the CFL. He's the epitome of what a Canadian player, and he was good enough. He would have made it without a guaranteed Canadian ratio. He would have made the team. If I owned the team, I would have had him there. And yes, you want the best Canadians, but only the best Canadians. Not the leftovers, not the players, CIS players that aren't good enough to play in the CFL. They should have their own amateur league or their own little amateur spring league or whatever. And then if there's good enough players, try them out and put them on a practice roster for CFL. Have like a practice roster, so many spots for them. But if you can't get the best Canadian players, then listen, you're not going to have a real professional football league playing with the best talent. So CFL 3-down football can be played at its highest level. And by the way, you have to have the best rules too. You have to have a rule that is going to make our CFL 3-down game a lot better and a lot more appealing and a lot more attractive. Okay, that's going to gravitate and captivate the NFL only fans and the younger generation sports fans. That's the mass market sports fans in Canada. Okay, and it's a new dynamic CFL Red-Zone Rule, like my rule, that's going to be the most entertaining and most dramatic, full of drama in the red zone, and the most innovative and the most exciting new CFL rule in the history of the CFL, and probably all CFL. Probably all professional football, because of what it can do, what it can remarkably do. I mean, the powerful selling features and benefits and advantages, justifiable advantages of adopting my CFL Red-Zone Rule. All my presentation, by the way, okay, that's on my CFL Red-Zone Rule Facebook page. But anyway, it's an awful thing. And getting, just before I end, they're using this nationalized or American like 49% if they're in the league 3 years for one team, or five with or five into the CFL. Okay, what a joke that is. 49%, and that's just one game. It's not a total of the whole year, and it's a joke because they get injured, and how many of those are you going to have? And by the way, another thing to this, because I'm going to sign off in a second, that's unbelievable, is that the teams that play the Canadian players most with this new like 49% ratio will get 2 Canadian draft picks on the second round. Can you imagine that? That's how bad it is. Signing off, Spider. I'm going. Spider, here comes Spider, CFL Red-Zone Rule.